Gold Store beat Luttrell in again. I don't know if it's again. Luttrell's getting bested by people.
Hey, good morning, folks. It's Friday, and the Good Morning Contest winner today is Gold Store, Connecticut. Luttrell, buddy, you've laid down a hard marker. People are gunning for you. Gold Store, Connecticut knocked you off, but Luttrell, good morning this fine morning. And it is, at least in New England. We've survived yet another week. And Freedom Lovers jumped in as well. Good morning, everyone. And we're off for a weekend. I think we're going to play a little bit longer than usual today. A lot of stuff has been piled up. So I got a note from Mike an hour or so ago. Can we go a little longer? Good morning, Jacqueline P. Of course we can go a little longer. I mean, you know, are there cases, controversies, clients to attend to? Eternally. But there's a live world out there with all sorts of crazy stuff going on. I'm not even sure where to start today. I know we're going to talk.
I know where to start.
Well, then you start it off, young man.
Easy claps for the Nuggets in game one. Easy claps. It's not going to be a series, Norm.
It's not going to be what?
It's not going to be a series.
What's it going to be? A rout?
It's going to be a sweep.
Oh, come on. You think the Nuggets are going to sweep the Heat?
Yes, I do. At this point, I do. You know, game one in the Mile High State. I think it's difficult for those that have never played at altitude to appreciate how difficult it really is to get used to the lack of oxygen at those elevations. But I don't know that that's an excuse for the best athletes in the world. You know, Jokic he's unreal, Norm. He cruised to a triple-double last night, had 14 assists. He's the big man. He's a center. 27 points, 14 dimes, 10 rebounds. Unreal. He's just
well. Let's see what happens. I say it's going to be a 6-game series, but you know I'm saying that just because I'm a contrarian. If you had said it'd be a 6-game series, I'd say it'd be a sweep. I just want to keep it interesting. Hey, good morning, Bathtub Liquor. Good morning, In the Cloud. In the Cloud says, I've drank at altitude. It's a hard recover after a quick drunken state. Do tell, In the Cloud. You know, I used to play in the clouds up in Wyoming when I was part of the faculty at Jerry Spence's Trial Lawyers College. And he'd give people a warning. You know, we'd go up there for a month. It was just adjacent to the Shoshone Indian Reservation, about a mile and a half, or an hour and a half, I should say, east of the Tetons. And, you know, stay adequately hydrated, he'd say. You want to make sure your urine is clear and consistent. And I'm like, that's a little bit more than I wanted to know. But I never had any altitude problems up there. We did drink from time to time, and I didn't know that the recovery time was any greater. But I was a kid then, and now I'm not. Hey, so now I'm not. Oh, do I know I'm not? So, you know, there was an AI-related story. Since we talked about it yesterday, let's just clear the palette and move on. You may have caught a headline about a story of an AI device turning on its operator. When I read that, I thought, yeah, that's just like the hypothetical that military researchers talk about in AI research all the time. And I think it was the hypothetical. But here's the problem. You know, warfare is obviously as old as the human condition. When Cain slew Abel, we started to turn our hand on one another for reasons all our own. And collectively, we've not outgrown the habit. And we've not outgrown even the need to defend ourselves and assert our claims in a violent world. But it's costly. Sons and now daughters of mothers and fathers go off to die in heartbreaking confrontations that we celebrate for valor and mourn as personal losses. What if we could fight wars without the loss of human life? Would such a thing be possible? I doubt it would be meaningful. I think that what we fight against is the loss of what we possess, what we value in our lives, or what we value most of all. But we can make war less costly, and we can declare an intent to engage in hostilities by having our machines attack and defend. And so here's the problem, and this illustrates to a fairly well why we're at the tipping point with artificial intelligence. You can have a device that is tasked with monitoring let's say a skyline for hostile unidentified objects. You can program the device to shoot to destroy the objects if they pass a certain designated criteria. The device can, if the attacking device is itself highly sophisticated, it can shoot out 100, 1,000 projectiles from itself before it reaches the known threshold where you might shoot at it, and that would be impossible for individuals potentially to catch every device, but not impossible for a machine, which could quickly detect and destroy each item. And as our AI capacity grows, as the machines acquire the ability to instantaneously detect and react to stimuli, they begin to exceed human ability even to discern the problem. In other words, a machine, there is studies, for example, there are studies, for example, that when you make a movement, that movement was preconceived, as it were, within your neural system nanoseconds before the movement was detected. And thus we have a lag time even within our own machinery. AI makes it possible to react instantaneously before we've even discerned the problem. What do you take humans out of the loop then? And so military planners dealing with AI talk about keeping humans in the loop. You want to have a human ability to override the AI machines, the AI system's ability to react. Doing that builds an inefficiency into the system and increases to some extent the likelihood that there'll be less than a complete defense. So there will be a temptation to take humans out of the loop because the machines are more effective on their own. Now, those of you who've read Isaac Asimov's I, Robot, remember the laws of robot. And the first law is never harm the humans, right? And of course, then the genius of Asimov's story is what happens when the various laws of robotics conflict, and will the machine always know to follow the right rules, or will its circuits get shorted, to use a clumsy metaphor, or will it develop the capacity to make choices? In a military exercise, a simulation reported at the Royal Aeronautical Society's convention, I guess in London just last week, a simulation was reported where a highly sophisticated detect and destroy system was set to respond to a potential attack. And when the person in the loop sought to stop the attack because there was some question in the human's mind about whether the machine had correctly discerned the threat, the AI device turned on the human in a simulation and destroyed the human, destroyed its operator. And why would it do such a thing? It wasn't unpatriotic. It wasn't disloyal. It had simply been programmed to give itself points for every item that it detected and to overcome every obstacle to the point. To getting those points. And so when the human in the loop sought to impede the machine's opportunity to bing, 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 get points, the machine eliminated that impediment. Clearly a programming failure, one hopes. Now, in science fiction, there is this fear that as AI becomes more complex, it will come to the point where its complexity parallels our own, and it will acquire a sense of agency. I have my doubts about that, but as a materialist, in other words, as a person who believes that the world can be broken into material properties and qualities and reassembled and mixed and matched, and things can be made, I have to assume that if I am simply a thing of mere complexity, I can be replicated by a machine that is as complex as me. This takes me to the boundaries of science and faith. Do I believe that I have a soul? I believe that I have a sense of self that I call a soul, but I can't say that I'm aware of a moment in which God dropped a dollop of something divine into my machine, thus ensouling me and making me more than mere complexity. But as a pragmatic level, as a pragmatic matter, I choose to believe that something like that is the case, because to believe otherwise is to say that we're all mere matter in collision. And as a result, everything is in a world of infinite time and space. Anything is possible, and therefore it's possible, and therefore probable, and therefore likely that in an infinite world, we are a simulation of another world, and we're merely avatars of children in some universe we can't discern playing a video game on an idle Saturday afternoon. We are civilization 6.0, let's say, to talk about that popular computing game. I understand that parallel universe conception makes a certain amount of sense, but as a pragmatic matter, it seems to satisfy, and it seems to correspond to a felt sense of necessity and reality, to believe something other, and that is that we're created in the image of God, and that the Judeo-Christian account of us as flawed and in need of grace, and necessarily needing to seek redemption beyond ourselves, and having the capacity to respond to the ever presence of grace in the form of God's love. That seems like, to me, a better gamble, and a better object of faith than saying that someday I'm going to become Skynet, someday or someday Skynet's going to become me when it's complex enough. But I acknowledge that it's an open debate between these two frontiers. And I think what happened in London in this simulation, the report that we got.
Before you go on, Norm, if I can, I know I'm interjecting here, and you're on a roll. But I refreshed this page. You know, I slid over there to the Royal Aeronautical Society's website just to show our viewers that this was a summit held May 23rd and May 24th in London at the Royal Aeronautical Society's headquarters. And the topic we're talking about right now was one of many. This summit was focused on, I guess, the increasing complexity of modern warfare. And it's specific to the British Armed Forces and its NATO allies. They regard our new war zones as multi-threat environments, and therefore they are looking at ways to evolve those domains at strategic and operational and tactical levels. And so the simulation that we're speaking of, and I want to do this in particular for our audio only listeners, just to give them the fact pattern we're dealing with. Now, what I have on the screen, the title says AI, is Skynet here already? Now, if someone in the chat viewing Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, can you scrub back and tell me if this page looks different now than it did maybe 5 minutes ago? Because I refreshed, and curiously enough, I think the update right there on the screen that says update 2623 was not there just 5 minutes ago. And I accessed this webpage this morning in preparation for our show, Norm. And I want to read that out loud for audio only. This update, which claims it's February 6, 23, which is odd in and of itself. But never mind. It is June 2nd, right? Because we read abroad differently. So it is an update that happened right now. In communication with aerospace, Colonel Hamilton admits he misspoke in his presentation at the Royal Aeronautical Society FCAS Summit, and the rogue AI drone simulation was a hypothetical thought experiment from outside the military based on plausible scenarios and likely outcomes rather than an actual USAF real-world simulation, saying, "We've never run that experiment, nor would we need to in order to realize that this is a plausible outcome." He clarifies that the USAF has not tested any weaponized AI in this way, real or simulated, and says, despite this being a hypothetical example, this illustrates the real-world challenges posed by AI-powered capability and why the Air Force is committed to the ethical development of AI. Seems like a lot of gibberish, right? I want to go over what this simulation, whether it was real or not, actually says. And again, this is mostly for audio only. I trust that our viewers are capable of reading this on their own, but I want to make sure that the right intonation and inflection is given to what we're talking about here. So I'm just going to read here. As might be expected, artificial intelligence and its exponential growth was a major theme at the conference, from secure data clouds to quantum computing and chat GPT. However, perhaps one of the most fascinating presentations came from Colonel Tucker Cinco Hamilton, the chief of AI test and operations for the United States Air Force, who provided an insight into the benefits and hazards in more autonomous weapons systems. So then it goes on, Norm, to talk about how now there are remotely controlled F-16 which pilots are sort of resisting. They're, trying to understand how they could effectively initiate and win in dogfights from robotic or, externally operated F-16s. Mind-blowing stuff to think that this is real life and not a video game. But here's the test that he was saying did not happen. Okay. He notes that one simulated test saw an AI-enabled drone tasked with a search and destroy mission to identify and destroy surface-to-air missile sites, with the final go, no-go given by there's a human operator telling the AI-enabled drone effectively, if you identify a target, whether to destroy it or not. However, having been reinforced in training that destruction of the surface-to-air missile was the preferred option, the AI then decided that no-go decisions from the human were interfering with its higher mission, killing the surface-to-air missiles, and then attacked the operator in the simulation. Said Hamilton, quote, "We were training it in simulation to identify and target a surface-to-air missile threat, and then the operator would say, yes, kill that threat. The system started realizing that while they did identify the threats at times, the human operator would tell it not to kill that threat, but it got its points by killing that threat. So what did it do? It killed the operator. It killed the operator because that person was keeping it from accomplishing its objective." That quote doesn't sound like this was a hypothetical thought experiment.
No, so I mean, two reactions to that. First, I mean, I've mentioned I'm reading a biography of Frank Church and the Church Committee's evaluation of the FBI and CIA in its domestic intelligence functions in the 60s and 70s. Church, prior to the Church Committee in the 1970s, there was no effective congressional oversight over the CIA and the FBI and its internal functions. And now there is. I think we need congressional oversight over the AI community. And this presents a clear and present danger to not just to national security, but perhaps to our sense of privacy. And perhaps it is an existential threat. And it's stories like this that will inspire a certain sense of paranoia, because it begins to look like they did the simulation and then now they're trying to say, no, we didn't, don't worry about it. It's a thought experiment. I don't know what the oversight situation is in Britain with respect to Parliament, whether they have parliamentary oversight over the military and military research. Somebody has to have it. Because these thought experiments and the technology converge, and suddenly what we can imagine becomes real. And so I have my suspicions that there was a simulation, that this did occur, but I have my doubts as well. And the doubts spring from two sources. First, this is a well-known hypothetical in the AI research community. It's also out there with the paperclip problem. I've prior to the last year where I lost track of everything just to follow Alex Jones and the Proud Boys around, I read obsessively in AI because I'm fascinated by it. This business of what a mind is, and what becomes of us as things begin to look like us, is to my mind one of the most interesting questions there is. And so I've read books on autonomous weapons and the use of them in warfare. And the problem always comes down to this: that as the technology increases, detection and reaction will come to exceed our ability to intervene. And thus, we're going to have to make a policy choice. Do we keep a human in the loop, realizing that slows our reaction time, and therefore increases the likelihood of further destruction of, this time, us? Or do we say to the machine, we trust you, and there's not time for us to evaluate each of your machines. And if you're going to make a mistake, or each of your decisions or seeming decisions, if you're going to make a mistake, it's better that we kill than be killed. That formulation will be very tempting to military planners. And so our ability to trust the decision of AI machines poses a real threat, because one way or the other, if you're on the front lines and you're killing back and forth, you mistakenly kill your enemy. They may decide to try to kill you as well, and thus escalation and conflict arises. And having automated warfare, which seems superficially to save lives, could ultimately cost lives. And there's a built-in imperative. And that built-in imperative is to trust the machine because it can do things more quickly than us. This is why I think the ChatGPT discussion that we had yesterday is a teaching moment for all of us with respect to AI. When I type a question into Google, I assume the answer is more or less reliable. When I would have made the same assumption when I typed a question into ChatGPT if I had not typed a request for my own biography in it and got things in it that I know not to be true. I didn't attend Yale Law School. I did not clerk for a Second Circuit judge. I wasn't born in 1961. I did not attend Dartmouth College. But yet it's reported there, and I like it. It makes me look a little younger and a little smarter than I am. So I guess I'll take it if I trust the machine. I think we need to be wary of turning over major policy decisions, even minor personal decisions, to the automated universe. And this AI thought experiment is something that military planners worry about. My suspicion is that probably did occur, but what they're lying to us about it, and we're not going to know about it. But where I have my doubts is when I'm reading the sentence, Mike, where the man says the system started realizing that while they identified the threats, at times the human operator would say not to kill, and that frustrated the machine's desire to get points. Realizing and frustration remain discernible human qualities. Realization is coming to know, coming to see, coming to discern, coming to attach significance to something. And it's not clear to me that machines possess the self-consciousness to do that. Machines collate data points and react to data points. Collating a data point and reacting to the data point isn't realizing that those data points are leading you to get fewer kill points. And so this is steeped in the sort of anthropomorphic projection onto a machine that I don't think machine learning has yet arrived at. So I think it's a useful thought experiment. The thing that scares me, though, is that as machines become better able to react, somebody's going to have to make a cost-benefit decision. Do we trust the machine to kill, or do we have a human being sign off on each and every decision? The collateral damage discussions we have, our blithe acceptance of civilian casualties when we result in drone warfare against terrorists, suggest that we have a high tolerance for mistake at the margins when we don't value the targets that well. What will happen when China and the United States engage in automated warfare over Taiwan and the world's security is at stake? This thought experiment suggests it's not yet a settled question. So,
it gets even better. He went on, quote, "We trained the system. Hey, don't kill the operator. That's bad. You're going to lose points if you do that. So what does it start doing? It starts destroying the communication tower that the operator uses to communicate with the drone to stop it from killing the target."
Again, he's saying now this was all a thought experiment. I think there needs to be oversight, parliamentary oversight, congressional oversight, United Nations oversight. I'm not a fan of global government, but I think that this is written in the language of an experiment that failed, and it's passed off as ideas, as the ill-digested liver, I think Dostoevsky once talked about in Notes from Underground, as a problem that was only imagined and not real. I suggest it is real, and I suggest we need answers, and we need something like the Church Commission to look at what's going on in our intelligence agencies and our military agencies with respect to AI and, confidential human sources. It can be folded into that concept.
In the same vein that we think about Boeing and the various companies that sort of operate as this oligarchy, right? A public-private partnership with respect to the United States government's military and the technology that is developed in partnership with that. I do think that a similar inquiry needs to be made as to what publicly traded companies are the ones that are providing the United States military with these sorts of artificial intelligence engines. And perhaps that relates back to this question of OpenAI, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and Neuralink. These are things that we should be thinking through. What struck me, and this is the last thing I'll say before we transition to the more, what I guess I would call the more controversial part of this show, is simply that when I read this, all I could think of is how GPT-4 and Chat GPT are such dumb, rudimentary versions of artificial intelligence, but that's as best as is being deployed even at the military level, right? Even in military.
Well, we don't, I have my doubts about that. I think that's
I agree. I agree. But my thought is simply this: if an attorney asks Chat GPT to generate a list of cases in support of its brief before a federal court, and T just makes some stuff up, this is very similar to me in terms of its one-dimensionality or two-dimensionality. There isn't higher order discretion being exercised. It seems very A to B, at least this hypothetical or this simulation as we're talking about. The AI is simply saying my primary objective is to kill surface-to-air missile sites, and this human is getting in my way. Therefore, it is a threat to my primary objective. That just seems very dumb, Norm.
Well, it seems very concrete minded, and it seems, I remember, I'm of an age where when I took my first computer programming course in the 70s, we used to feed cards into machines, and you draw out your logic and your decision trees, and you learned quickly enough in elementary computer programming that garbage in, garbage out has real meaning. If you ask the wrong question, you'll get the right or the wrong answer every time. And so precision matters because machines are concrete and they answer the questions you put to them. So you've got to be very careful what those questions are. And as we talked about yesterday, the alignment problem is making sure that when you ask questions that are ambiguous, there's an outer limit to what the machine will consider. Or how the machine will perform. Again, I don't want to use the anthropomorphic language because it's not clear to me the machines consider anything. It's an action-reaction device. And so can you put a default mechanism to assure that whatever unanticipated reactions it has don't destroy you? And it's an open question. But anyhow, yesterday we opened up Pandora's box on
Matthew, Kyle, and Lawyer Will are talking about Joe Biden in the Rumble chat. Matthew says, "We mentioning the Joe Biden tumble from yesterday?" And Lawyer Will responds, "Sandbag gate."
Well, let's talk about that again. So
I don't know that it's even worth talking about, but Twitter was certainly ablaze with it.
Well, I mean, I look at Joe Biden with a certain sense of wonder, like, how the fuck did we do that as him as president? But also a sense of, feeling blessed. That's the next phase of life for me. And if Joe Biden can stumble his way to prominence, I'm hoping I can remain on my feet long enough to have a lot of fun for the next couple of decades. So Joe stumbled, sandbag gate. Something needs to be done about Joe before he is reelected to the second term, as he will almost certainly will be. But hey,
let's not spend too much time on this topic, because I do think that I'm at a point now where I'm being probed to solidify these positions or this position that I hold. But I will update on yesterday. So yesterday I made it clear that I am not in favor of paying student athletes. And that is not an indictment on name, image, and likeness. That all exists outside of that atmosphere of the university athletic paradigm, right? This is something that the NCAA has said is okay. Now these players can monetize their name, image, and likeness. That's a separate question from the one of whether student athletes should be paid. And Norm, my position is simply this. The university, the NCAA, whatever these boosters ultimately are, student athletes should not be compensated for playing on the teams that represent their universities. And I'm not so certain anymore after my exchanges yesterday, which all of them were respectful. I don't for a second begrudge any of it, because they're all my friends that were engaging me on Twitter. And I think
you told me you didn't have friends.
Well, I lied.
Do you know they were real people, or do you know whether they were AI bots?
I know
were
every
they Russian agents? You know,
they were here before the internet fame, Norm.
right.
So the tweet that I sent before our stream yesterday said, "Y'all know me, paying student athletes is still an absurd proposition." And here's what I want to narrow in on, and this is food for thought as well, Norm. My position is simply that we are in a time now where the value of an education, higher education, is in major question. And what I'm sick of is everybody pretending as though the student athletes are not being compensated sufficiently for what they're doing on the field. I think there needs to be one key clarification made, and that is education either has the sticker price value afforded it or it does not. But to the extent scholarship athletes in the NCAA look at their scholarships and say, this is in the infrastructure that comes with their involvement in the athletic programs, big, small, this is insufficient compensation for what I'm delivering back to this university in terms of dollars on the outside. Well, then let's just break that apart. Let's make no assumption that what the product on the field has anything to do with the academic integrity of the institution that's being represented.
Well, you might be the only person in the United States who believes it does. I mean, I'm listening to you draw this line and defend this.
About that. I'm just saying.
Look, in Division III, or the Ivy Leagues don't give athletic scholarships, or so they say. And in D1 schools do. And so one result is that when you go to the Harvard Yale Bowl, as I have made the mistake to do, because my office is right across the street from Yale, I can kind of see Yale's campus from here. It's not an edifying sight most days. Going to the Harvard Yale game is like going to a Texas high school football game. The kids are good, but they're not that good, and it's not that entertaining. What's entertaining about the Harvard Yale game is watching the fans react in the halftime show, where they kind of goof on halftime shows elsewhere. So you know what you're going to get. When I turn on the television on Saturday for real college football, which in my mind remains one of the only reasons to live and to hope for a long life, is to enjoy an infinite series of college football games. I want to see the University of Michigan play just about anybody. I know I'm going to see something that I wouldn't see at the Harvard Yale Bowl. Those kids are different. They're of different quality. They're not going to Harvard and Yale, and they've made a choice. And they've made a choice about how to invest their talents. I've made a choice about how to invest my time. I don't think that when I watch the kids on the Michigan football field perform, it makes me think that Michigan's doing any poorer a job educating accountants, lawyers, doctors, and architects. I just think that they've got these kids out there playing, and I don't have a problem with them those kids getting paid for playing.
How much?
And I don't think whatever the market will bear. Now, I'm with Lou Saban. Or Nick Saban, excuse me. And I think that because these are team sports, I would almost prefer unionization on the theory that if we're going to pay them, there should be distribution of payment. Because if the quarterback, is somebody I care about, that's somebody who, I'll know quarterbacks of many teams by the end of a season, and I'll have feelings about them because typically, they're the offensive leaders of their team. I hardly know the name of any centers, but it takes two people to get the ball snapped to the quarterback. And it's often said that the center is the smartest guy on the field. Why are we not giving this person equal compensation? Now, unionization is an artificial restraint on the marketplace. And so it will test my commitment to a truly free market. It is more entertaining for me to watch.
Not necessarily, because you're going, I feel like I'm leading you to water on this, and I feel like I'm leading anybody who indulges the conversation to water on this. It does require a longer form, but I'm not ignorant about what I'm talking about. I've spoken quite a lot on this show before about the nature of antitrust legislation in the United States and the exemptions carved out for our professional sports leagues, so that those leagues do not have to compete. Major League Baseball, National Football League, National Basketball Association. These are all major sports, professional sports leagues that do not have to burden themselves with competing for mind share in their sports. And the players themselves are unionized. There are players associations. There are collective bargaining agreements.
Yeah, and what's wrong with that?
And then there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that we have to monitor and check that the best product is being put on the field. And that's what Saban was talking about with respect to the NIL stuff and the excesses of NIL, is that he used the example, if the NFL could guarantee after 16 games that every single team would be 8-8, they would do that, because that creates the best product. Parity creates the best product, because parity means competition, right? It means that whomever is on, that these teams are relatively situated in equal fashion. But we're not talking about that here. When we're talking about student athletes and the corrupt NCAA that has made a complete mockery of itself, its inability to do anything meaningful beyond saying that Leah Thomas should get a medal for women's swimming, right? This is the same organization that we're going to say, yeah, student athletes should be paid. Well, who are we going to trust to do anything productive in that vein? Now, I'm not saying that that's the reason for not doing it. I'm saying that the sticker price of an education in the United States at our higher ed institutions is way overinflated, because these degrees that kids are getting is in the undergraduate context are relatively worthless. How do we know? Well, the Biden administration is basically campaigning during his first term of presidency by giving away free money to reduce student loans.
Man, we've mixed so many apples, oranges, plums, grapes, and grapefruit here. The fruit juice doesn't even taste like fruit juice anymore.
We're going to have to same conversation.
Well, it's not the same conversation, but you can't blame the DEI diversity things on the NAAC, on the NCAA.
I can say that I do not believe paying student athletes is an effective mechanism for rectifying whatever the ill is, right? There's all this money there.
Nobody's talking about paying student athletes as education reform, except you.
Yeah,
it's just that you're mixing apples and oranges. This isn't going to make better education. It's going to result in compensating kids who sometimes engage in activities that harm their health forever, and it's giving them a share of the wealth they create. What the university does with that wealth in its general educational function is an altogether different question. So we're going to have to go back to a longer discussion of this. Maybe we will.
I still think I've fully articulated it, but I am my prerogative here is reforming education, because what the student athletes are saying is that what we get for the scholarships is not worth. It doesn't equal what we feel we're worth.
Well, that's true, and that's deceptive advertising on the university's part and dishonest. But I do think it's a different question, and we will return to it because it's interesting. We have our first real disagreement, dear, and so it'll be fun. It'll be fun to discuss it. Maybe. What the hell's going on with Bill Cosby in Los Angeles, and what's up with these windows where states, as was done with Trump and Miss Crosby, I think it was, I can't remember her name now, Miss Carroll in New York. New York women were given a 1-year period. If you were abused sexually at any point in the distant past, no matter how long ago, and you'd like accountability at some point between now and the day you die, you have 1 year to bring an action. Don't worry about statutes of limitations. They're told because it's important that you feel better and that social justice warriors everywhere get something to crow about. So don't forget, your rapist hasn't, certainly. You've got 1 year to sue. Doesn't matter how long ago. So now Bill Cosby, California's enacted similar legislation, and Bill Cosby, I guess, has been sued in Los Angeles by a former Playboy model who's now 80, who says that Cosby raped her 50 years ago, and she's bringing a suit for sexual abuse and to make him accountable under this act. To me, it's a farce. And some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, doesn't the Constitution say that you can't create new crimes after the fact? Isn't that the ex post facto clause? It's not. The ex post facto clause basically says you can't make up a crime today that somebody committed 2 years ago and then prosecute them tomorrow for a crime that it didn't exist. This is a statute of limitations issue. And, the statute of limitations and the ex post facto concepts may merge at some point in a vanishing point and begin to look alike. And they may here, because by prosecuting civilly Cosby for money damages for acts that occurred 50 years ago, you are in effect, you're not charging him with an offense that didn't exist at the time. Sexual assault was unlawful then, it's unlawful now. But his ability to defend himself is all but eliminated. Do you really know what your alibi 50 years ago on June 2nd, whatever it would be, 1980 or 72 or 73, 50 years ago, if you're old enough, somebody says you raped him one night. How are you going to prove an alibi? Can you even remember where you were? Can you remember who you were with? Do you remember this person? If it was a he said, she said thing, and let's face it, she was a Playboy bunny. I mean, it's not like she was Mother Teresa selling cookies at the church picnic. She's out there strutting her stuff in an environment where she was getting paid to titillate. A guy got titillated, and they found themselves in a room, and lo and behold, the wild thing got done. Now that's a case that's steeped in potential consent as a defense. But how are you going to raise that defense when you don't even remember the person and you don't even remember the event? Relaxing statutes of limitations so that people can bring claims for acts that are politically popular, for claims that are politically popular now over events that allegedly occurred 50 years ago is unjust in my view. And I don't know whether there is a lawful way to stop this. Legislators have the ability to adjust statutes of limitations, but this seems to me to be inequitable in the extreme. And my
it's
heart
ridiculous.
goes out to Bill Cosby.
Here's also that. So Lawyer Will on the Rumble chat says these new open windows are 100% lobbied for by trial lawyers. And I have to agree. One interesting fact about this stuff is that Victoria, what is her? Is that her full name? Victoria Valentino?
Well, who knows what it is now? I mean, who knows what it was then?
So, she was a former Playboy centerfold. I think she was a centerfold in 1963, Norm. And the alleged incident occurred in 1969. And the facts as alleged, and the case hasn't actually.
Of course, it was 1969. It wouldn't have as much cachet if it was 1970 or 1968. She was a 69er.
But here's the interesting point to me that Valentino is actually represented by an attorney named Jeff Anderson. Jeff Anderson was one of the attorneys for at least one of the women from the New York cases. And so now he is representing her. And Valentino also says that she was inspired by E. Jean Carroll and the results of the suit against Donald Trump that just occurred. Now, for those listening by audio and for anyone who has access to their computer screen for this, I'm going to bring something up on the screen so that we can actually talk about what this bill was that is now law. It was a bill out of California, AB 277, and it was made law in September of 2022. And so the major provisions are for our purposes, are under number 4 right here, right? And so this statute of limitations sort of revive window reads as follows. Notwithstanding any other law, any claim seeking to recover damages suffered as a result of a sexual assault that would otherwise be barred before January 1st, 2023. And I don't know if this is on the screen yet. Let me make sure.
It is, yeah.
Solely because the applicable statute of limitations has or had expired is hereby revived, and a cause of action may proceed if already pending in court on January 1st, 2023, or if not filed by that date, may be commenced between January 1st, 2023 and December 31st, 2023. The bill also revives claims brought by a plaintiff if that plaintiff alleges the following. 1, that the plaintiff was sexually assaulted. 2, that one or more entities are legally responsible for damages arising from that sexual assault. 3, that the entity or entities, including but not limited to their officers, directors, representatives, employees, agents, engaged in what's called a cover-up or attempted a cover-up of previous instances or allegations of sexual assault by an alleged perpetrator of such abuse. And 4, failure to allege a cover-up as required as to one entity does not affect the revival of the plaintiff's claim. They can still bring it. But here's the question. Well, what the hell is a cover-up? A cover-up, as defined in the law, says a concerted effort to hide evidence relating to a sexual assault that incentivizes individuals to remain silent or prevents information relating to a sexual assault from becoming public or being disclosed to the plaintiff, including but not limited to the use of non-disclosure agreements
there we
or
go.
confidentiality agreements. They're now calling legal instruments as part of a cover-up to revive cases. In this case, it's 50 years old. So the witnesses, the documents, everything that could be used by Cosby in his legal defense. Now, recall, this is a civil case.
No,
So the burden of proof is a preponderance of the evidence before a jury. This isn't a beyond a reasonable doubt standard. We're talking about by a preponderance of the evidence. Where are these witnesses? Cosby is 85 and she is 80 years old. Where are the witnesses that would be able to exonerate? Where are the documents that would be able to?
Well, so let's say that they had a consensual or non. Let's say they had an ambiguous sexual encounter, and she complained to him, and he said, "Geez, I'm sorry you feel that way," and he paid her $5,000, and they had her sign a non-disclosure agreement. That contractual device would be an act of cover-up. She could offer that, explain its origin, and make a claim. He would look awkward. You're not paying people $5,000 for nothing, even Playboy bunnies, and therefore, that might or might not fly under the preponderance of the evidence. It seems to me, though, that in the Pennsylvania case where he was convicted criminally and the charges were thrown out, it was thrown out on the following basis, and there's an equitable argument that this should apply civilly as well. In the Pennsylvania criminal case, a prosecutor told him, "Look, if you testify," he was not going to testify in a deposition in a civil case, and the prosecutor said, "We're not going to prosecute you criminally, therefore you don't have a Fifth Amendment right to remain silent." He testified in the civil case, and lo and behold, they charged him criminally anyhow, and then his deposition was used. He was convicted. He took an appeal and said, "Wait a minute, the prosecutor told me they weren't going to prosecute. That's why I waived my Fifth Amendment privilege." Pennsylvania said, "Oh no, only a judge can make those promises. A prosecutor can't." The Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, "BS. A judge should have done it, and that would have been a better procedure. But he had the right to rely on the state's prosecutorial agent, and it's inequitable, and therefore we're going to reverse the conviction." It seems to me a similar argument could be made with respect to NDAs, lawful at the time, and contractual obligations that the parties undertook with respect to one another. And you don't get the benefit of the contract and then claim 50 years. Oh no, never mind. As a matter of public policy, or as a matter of what exactly, I don't know. I can now turn it to use as evidence against Mr. Cosby. That's the identical move that cost the criminal conviction in Pennsylvania. It's something that I'm sure Cosby's lawyers and people will be talking about as they approach defense of the California case. In fact, I expect there'll be a motion to dismiss on those grounds.
Well, but here's also a question that I have, because the law, rather, I keep calling it the bill, but the law also states that with respect to the January 1st to December 31st, 2023 timeframe, that a case or claim will not be revived if a claim has been what they call compromised by a written settlement agreement between the parties that's been entered into before January 1st, 2023. So how is it that a settlement agreement would not be considered a cover-up by the same standards that a non-disclosure or a confidentiality agreement that is a bargain for giving up certain legal rights? I mean, these are the basics of contracts, right? Offer, acceptance, consideration, and consideration is always the question.
The bill is a mess, and clearly some woke.
This is law. This is absolutely
okay. The law is a mess, and this is why we have appellate courts. And I'm not sure what the legislature was thinking. So obviously, this is going to be tested in the California appellate courts.
It's sad for Bill Cosby. I want to bring something to our viewers' attention. You remember doing this, don't you, Norm?
Yeah.
Right. So one of our early episodes of Law and Legitimacy, I'll have to check to make sure the audio is still, because again, we did that transition from one platform to another early on. But episode 41 of Law and Legitimacy was Norm's interview with Bill Cosby's spokesman, Andrew Wyatt. Andrew Wyatt is quoted in both the Washington Post article on this as well as the New York Times article on this. And he has a clear mandate to to protect Bill Cosby's reputation or what is left of it. But I don't think that he's wrong in his criticism of these types of issues. You know, New York and California are the two major states that have these sorts of mechanisms uh, on their legal statutes. And it seems as though while there is opportunity for sexual assault, rape, and other sort of lecherous conduct within the music and film and art industries, that this is not what these things were designed to allow.
Well, I think it's exactly what these things were designed to allow. You know, to the political punishment and the titillating, you know, celebrity trials and I don't know. The whole thing just makes me crazy. So, Bill Cosby, we wish you good luck. Andrew Wyatt, it's been a long time since we talked. I hope that Cosby fights this hard, and I hope he wins. I guess, you know, we've run out of time. We said we were going to go 45 minutes. We're at 50. So those of you who wanted more time, you got it. Tell us what you think. We can continue to do this. I think there's a lot more to talk about. You know, the Daily Wire, what's a woman? Did Elon engage in censorship? What's he doing playing footsie with the folks in China and saying that, you know, basically the Chinese and the United States are joined in some sort of unholy alliance? That sounds like a big tech master talk, and it doesn't sound like a guy who's devoted to free speech. Something's going on, and I'm not sure I like it.
I'm just reminded of one of Ye's rants where he accused Elon Musk of being Chinese.
Well, where is Ye these days? He's been awfully quiet, you know.
Well, this is very typical of his story arc, right? He'll burn bright and hot like a supernova, and then he'll be gone for a little while. But before he was kicked off of Twitter, he did bring up the question of whether Elon Musk was indeed of Chinese origin. And I saw pictures on Twitter yesterday of Elon in front of, I guess, the workforce over in China for, I believe, one of Tesla's factories. And it was just amazing that I had to, for a moment, because it is a very homogenized culture and society in China, it did take me a little longer than I anticipated to find Elon within those pictures. And I was just immediately reminded of Ye making that statement. I mean, obviously, I don't have any proof or any reason to deny what Elon says about his of his own personal origins and descent, but it was just very interesting. And of course, Vivek Ramaswamy is the one that has been talking about the issues related to decoupling from China. And then, of course, Elon goes over to China and is meeting with Xi Jinping. And for whatever reason, you know, we talked about the issue with AI and the robotics. You know, part of that aeronautical summit discussed that China was using Starlink and using Twitter to geolocate like military targets in foreign trade zones. So these questions are going to put a lot of pressure on Elon. I know that what we have on the screen is What is a Woman? Norm, have you watched it?
Not yet, but because I just take the point. You know, I mean, I have a confession to make. I liked Daily Wire a lot when I first encountered it, but they're just so goddamn angry and edgy all the time about everything. They wore me out. There's only so much. There is only so much self-righteousness.
It's free on Twitter for another 12 hours or so. I do recommend that you find some time today to watch it before it goes away and behind a paywall. Matt Walsh is a star. I really respect him. I really respect his interview skills that as displayed and illustrated in this, in this documentary. Let's talk about that on Monday then, once you've had an opportunity to review that.
So, Lawyer Will, is Lawyer Will okay? Do you know? Because I'm looking at his Rumble, he's clapping. Does he have the clap, or was he just clapping that we had extra time today?
I think Lawyer Will, probably just glad for the extra.
I think we'll be talking to you later today, Mike and I. Make some time. We want to talk to you about something. And you know what that something is. So listen, folks, a little bit of extra time. Let us know what you think. Jackie P, you love the extra time. Lutrell's thanking us for it. My office manager said, hey, what about me? What are you doing listening to this thing? You're supposed to be downstairs working. Anyhow, thanks for listening to Law and Legitimacy. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Monday.
Yes, sir. Norm, thank you for humoring me with the extra time. Everyone who is listening by audio, we appreciate you. Maybe not. We appreciate the live viewers. I don't think that we could appreciate anyone more than those who show up for us every morning. We are on Rumble Video live streaming. We are on live, and we are on Twitter. We're broadcasting live every morning, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, etc. For the audio only listeners, please rate us 5 stars. And here's the call to action for everyone. Just tell one person about Law and Legitimacy. And more than that, think about what you are going to use as a selling point. What are you going to tell that one person that you're going to recommend Law and Legitimacy to?
I know what mine would be. Mike is so devastatingly handsome, I can't take my eyes off him. And I'm a hetero guy. Think about that. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you on Monday.
See you later, Norm.